So falling in love with this moment. That's the title of satsang today. Falling in love with this moment. It conjures up images or ideas of a blissful state, a happy state, a peaceful state. It may even conjure up the idea of liking this moment. But what's being referred to has nothing to do with liking it, or it being any particular way that we want it to be. Because we cannot control the moment. This moment is uncontrollable. This moment is wild. This moment is untamable. This moment is unknowable, ungraspable, unfixable. And every moment is unique. And forever unfolding and offering itself. So if we attempt to like it, or find some kind of positive state of mind or positive state of feeling from this moment, then we are bound to lose. We are bound to fail. And then this moment has let us down, and we're disappointed and disillusioned. So the question really is, how do we fall in love with this moment when it's terrible? How do we fall in love with this moment when it's terrible? When it hurts? When we don't like it? When we want to recoil? When we want to turn away? When we shrink in the face of it? When we want to run away and hide? When it cuts us to the core, when it pierces our heart and its agony? When it breaks us, when it brings us to our knees? What do we do then? How do we fall in love with that moment? Not with the circumstance, but with the moment. When we stop trying to achieve any kind of blissful state or ecstatic state or transcendent state. Because the problem in spirituality is that we want to transcend the horror of the human condition. And first of all, we have to admit that the human condition is a horror. Or it includes that, yeah? It includes the horror and the agony and the brokenness and the tragedy. There's a kind of tragedy to the human experience, because everything eventually is lost. The body, the youthfulness, whatever has been gained, whether that's material, even all the positive feelings. At some point, they will dissolve back into the ocean of consciousness. They will not belong to you anymore. They don't belong to you anyway, but we think they belong to us once we're still alive. So there'll be nothing to cling to. And that's the tragedy of the human experience. Everything that is gained, everything that is achieved, everything that is created, everything that is owned, is possessed, it all dissolves back into emptiness, formlessness, as your body dissolves inevitably at some point. And to face that fact does not necessarily make us a victim of it. It can do. That's why the majority of humanity runs away from facing that fact. To truly face that allows you to meet life from a very different place. You could call that place surrender. Not the surrender of a victim, but the surrender of truly being present to what is, however it is, however each wave, each moment appears, even if it breaks you, even if it crushes you. Ultimately, it doesn't break you and it doesn't crush you, but it may feel that way. It may feel that way. And to avoid that does not bring any more peace. To fully face it is to soften and open around it. So falling in love with this moment is like falling in love. Full stop. When you fall in love, you're very present. You're very present with the other. You're in the moment. That's why love, or falling in love, seems eternal. Time seems to stand still. What's really happened is that the seeking mechanism has stopped. When you fall in love, the seeking mechanism comes to a full stop. You're no longer seeking wholeness from another, because in the stopping, you already are fulfilled. That's why falling in love makes us feel full and complete. There's nothing more to search for. When the seeking mechanism stops, you're not running away into the future, trying to control it or fix it. This moment is enough. Now, inevitably, when you fall in love, that seeking mechanism kicks in again, and then the other isn't quite as perfect as you thought, and you do want to fix them. But for a short while, this whole seeking for something other than what is here just comes to a standstill. That's called surrender. You're not surrendering to the other, you're simply being here, fully present in this moment. It is fulfilled and complete in itself. There is nothing more to look for. Now the trick is how to stay softly and openly in the stop of that. Because the seeking mechanism is tricky, and inevitably it comes back. Whether we're seeking happiness or seeking love or seeking spiritual enlightenment or seeking anything, security or stability or safety or material wealth or whatever it is. The seeking mechanism sneaks into everything. And falling in love with this moment is simply, another way of saying it, a full stop to the seeking. That doesn't mean that your life life just falls apart. It doesn't mean that there's no drive or movement or impulse to be creative or to offer or to build or to create. All of this comes, but it comes from a very different place. A very different place. But before that can move, before that can flow in you as the deeper impulse of innate intelligence, the seeking mechanism must be seen, must be noticed, must be brought to awareness, so that when it kicks in again, you can feel, you can sense how it pulls you up, metaphorically, to the surface of the ocean, where the waves are moving and where there is an attempt at that surface level to control those waves, or grasp those waves, or change those waves, or fix those waves. Because the surface is always changing. The surface is uncontrollable, but that's the place where we attempt to control life. And the way you notice it is noticing where there is a story around it. Noticing where there is a should or a shouldn't. This shouldn't be happening is a very strong key that the seeking mechanism is very active in you. This shouldn't be happening. I shouldn't be feeling like this. So the shouldn't be happening can be directed towards a circumstance, something that's happening in your life, in your experience. It could be a big circumstance, like losing your job or relationship breaking up or whatever it might be. Or it could be a small circumstance, something immediate that's happening that you don't like. He shouldn't have said that to me. She shouldn't have spoken to me like that. So it could be directed at a circumstance, or it could be directed at your inner landscape, a feeling. How often when we have a difficult, or let's call it a negative or a painful or a dark or a powerful, overwhelming feeling, how often is that not followed up with a subtle, I shouldn't be feeling this way? Yeah? We overlay our experience with how we want it to be. And if it doesn't match up to how we want to feel, or should feel, especially if we're spiritual, there's a lot of shoulds in that, then we are fighting that moment. We are resisting that moment. We are not fully present with what is unfolding. Out of innate intelligence, out of the intelligence of life that offers itself fully to us. It doesn't hold back, it gives everything in that moment. So this simple act of noticing how we are pulled to the surface, and the surface creates a should or a shouldn't, simple act of noticing that gives you a choice. Gives you the choice to surrender that. Not to change it. Not to add another should or shouldn't to it. It's another overlay. But to surrender that. To see it. And to surrender it. And you have to figure out how surrender works. Nobody can show you that. Nobody can teach you that. It's an inner, intimate experience that you have to work out for yourself. How to surrender. And what you're really surrendering, or being invited to surrender, is division. You're being invited to surrender the divided mind. The mind that divides experience into good and bad, this and that, right and wrong, should and shouldn't. That does not mean that you do not have discernment. Yeah, we have discernment in life. So you discern whether to walk left or right, whether to take this action or that action. But the habit of the divisive mind to divide every feeling, every experience into should and shouldn't, is the cause of discontent. And the invitation of this moment is for you to surrender that. To see it and give it up. And that does not mean that it goes away once and for all, because it's the nature of mind to be divisive, to divide its experience. But in the seeing of it over and over again, and in the surrender of it over and over again, something finally relaxes. And in that relaxation, you stop giving your attention to the surface of experience, to the waves. Something surrenders, and it lets the waves flap around, whilst there's a coming into being, into beingness. And in beingness, which is the same as saying presence, being totally, fully present here, there's no division. In fact, there's no mind to divide its experience. You're meeting reality, reality being this moment and this moment and this moment as it appears in your experience. You're meeting reality from wholeness. You're meeting reality from that which is whole in you, complete. Therefore, the seeking mechanism is not active here. It's not the seeking place, it's the resting place. Now, very often in many of my meetings and conversations with people, even in very experienced or long-term spiritual seekers, there's still a subtle idea, not often conscious, but when spoken about, it's like, yes, acknowledged. There's still a subtle idea that spiritual awakening, freedom, enlightenment, call it what you will, brings a state of peace or transcendence, or words don't suffice, but there's kind of this sense that spiritual awakening means that you won't be touched by life. Nothing will ever hurt anymore. Nothing will ever irritate anymore. Nothing will ever get to you anymore. It's a kind of naive idea because it's not very well thought out. I mean, has anyone ever experienced that as a human being? Like nothing rocks you, nothing touches you? Is there this mythical place of enlightenment where it's kind of an infantile idea when you really examine it? And it's one that's often perpetuated by more traditional spiritual teachings that do not bring into the conversation the mess of the human experience, that focus almost entirely on pointing to the absolute. And of course the absolute, the formless, the emptiness, is untouched by anything that happens. And of course in awakening, you are rooted in that, you are anchored in that. And that absolute state of emptiness is known and realized and lived. There can be no freedom without that. There's no more seeking, because you are that. But at the same time, it includes the human experience. And the human experience is a relative one, or one of duality, which means on a human level, you will be touched by life. It will hurt. It will pierce your heart. You will feel, in other words, you will feel your human experience. And that can be included in freedom. The freedom is the capacity, the willingness to let the waves come crashing in, to not resist anything, to be fully broken open and to know, not intellectually, but in the deepest part of your innermost being, that you are unharmed by that. even though the body may be broken, even though the emotions are overwhelming, even though it all comes crashing in like a big storm, to allow that and to feel that, to open to it, without any reservation, and not as something in opposition to that or to balance that, but paradoxically at the same time, in the same experience, the truth of you is absolutely untouched by that. Now this is totally not comprehensible by the mind. It's a living experience. And it's not an experience that happens, enlightenment, and then that's it. Enlightenment, and now I can open to everything, or I am open to everything, and I know my true nature. It's actually a deepening experience after that. It's a deepening and a maturing of that. Because life's intelligence brings to us more subtle ways of getting to those places that perhaps have not been touched before, perhaps have not been opened before. Any place that still holds a contractive energy, whether it's through conditioning or trauma or karma. The light of awakening will find that place. And that's a process that happens over time. So it's not a one-time affair. So what I'm saying here is really that awakening is an ongoing invitation to surrender. And going back to the conversations that I have with a lot of people in meetings, there's an idea that it's just a one-time event, and then after that, there's a spiritual opening or an awakening or an awakened experience, and then there's a numbness, because there's a subtle holding on to that awakened state of stillness or the absolute emptiness when it's been glimpsed or experienced and it's authentically experienced. Then there's a subtle holding on to that, as if there's a fear that life will come in and spoil it and ruin it and taint it. And what I'm inviting you into is the surrender of that too. That life will come in. It has to. It has to. Because awakening is not an escape from life. It's not a transcendence of the earthly experience, the human experience. Awakening is an invitation for the whole of life to come rushing in and obliterate every part of you that thinks anything should be anything different to how it is now. It's like a tsunami. For some people it's not a tsunami, it's a little more gentle than that. But for some people it is. Your job is to get out of the way of that and allow it to come. That's a kind of purification. It's a purification of every place in ourselves that holds on to any image or idea of how things should be. and forever. Not now and that's it. Now and for as long as you're alive. It's a radical invitation. It's huge. And very often the spiritual search is used as a way, unconsciously, because it's sneaky, it's used as a way to delay this that I'm speaking of, to delay the full invitation of awakening, which is to allow the totality of this experience, now and forevermore, to devastate anything in you that operates from a divisive or divided place. And the thing about the spiritual search is that it's a delay tactic sometimes, not always. But it means that you can carry on seeking with the imagination that one day there'll be a waking up and then life won't be so troublesome anymore. But the real invitation is now, which is the deepest acceptance of the troublesome nature of life. Life is troublesome. And the deepest acceptance of that means that you will be untroubled by that. You will be untroubled by the wavy nature of life. Because life is wavy. It's stormy. It comes, it goes, it ebbs and flows. It rises, it falls. Pushes, it pulls. The nature of life is movement, just like the waves on the ocean. Sometimes it's troublesome, sometimes it's wonderful. Your deepest acceptance of that means that you're untroubled by it. The ocean is untroubled by the waves. And yet the ocean includes the waves. That's the paradox of waking up. And in that paradox, there's nothing to seek. The ocean doesn't try to seek stillness. The ocean doesn't become more ocean by being still. The ocean doesn't say, well, I'll know myself, my true nature as ocean, when all those waves stop moving around. It's such a simple metaphor, the metaphor of the ocean and the waves. But it's very, very It describes everything. You just contemplate the ocean and the waves and you'll come to full realization. Be the ocean. Be the ocean, which is the totality. The totality. Not getting lost in the waves, which is what the majority of humanity does. It gets lost in the waves. It believes itself to be the waves. Oh, I'm this wave, I'm that wave. I'm a good wave, that's a bad wave. So it's not about getting lost in the waves. It's not about identifying with the waves. That's the divided mind that I'm speaking of. This is good wave, this is a bad wave. This is an enlightened wave, this is an unenlightened wave. This is a spiritual wave, this is not a spiritual wave. You can't divide life into spiritual and not spiritual. It's the mind's imagination. It's not reality. There's no such thing as spiritual or unspiritual. There's reality and there's fantasy. Reality is what is. Fantasy is what your mind would like it to be. That's it. Get that? You're awake. It's that simple. So it's not about getting lost in the waves, finding your identity in the waves. Creating yourself, your sense of self out of the waves. Because that perpetuates the seeking. Whether it's material seeking or spiritual seeking is the same thing. It's about allowing the waves, not because they're separate from you or something that's happening to you, but because they are the ocean. They're inseparable. The ocean and the waves are one. As you and life are one. You as your true nature, your innermost being, your most intimate self that is beneath and beyond identity, beneath and beyond who you think you are, beneath and beyond any conditioning, your true nature, beingness. Beingness without condition. Not being this or being that. Not being happy or being blissful or being spiritual. Just being. Just being. And being includes everything. It's not being happy or sad. It's not being hurt or elevated. And yet, all of life's experienced is experienced through being. The waves are appearing in the ocean, not outside of the ocean, as the ocean. You and life are one. You as beingness and life as the movement of life, as its experience, which is ever changing and ever flowing and ever rising and ever falling, are one. You're inseparable. There is no life outside of you. It can only be experienced through you, as you. The waves can only be experienced as the ocean. Can you see then that there's nothing to change, nothing to fix, nothing to seek? It's complete in itself. It is itself, just as you are yourself. You are complete. There's nothing more than this. It's only your willingness and capacity to surrender to this that can make any difference to what you experience as your life.